Senator Nick DeSantis from here in Pinellas County. Ronnie Drimmer from Clearwater lives in one of the condos, condo unit owner. Earl Cooper, also a condo unit owner from Bel Air. And Deborah Reinhardt, CEO of Resource Property Management, president of the Chief Executive Officers of Management Companies. And so, as you might expect, we're here to hold another roundtable discussion about condos, condo safety, but also making sure that we have sensible policies that are not imposing draconian burdens on condo unit owners. I want to make sure that people are able to stay in their units. I want to make sure that what is done is flexible and is meeting the needs of the people of our state. Now, I think most people remember June of 2021, the Surfside Tower collapse, Champlain Towers in Surfside, Florida, was a catastrophic event to see. Not something you see very often anywhere in the United States, thankfully, but that was a catastrophic event. It killed 98 people, devastated families. It was a real serious blow to that community and to the state of Florida writ large. And so in the aftermath of that, people were understandably saying, how could this happen? What can be done to maybe prevent? And I would note that we're here today, more than 3 years after the Surfside Tower collapse, and we still don't have a final report from the federal agency that's in charge of identifying these building collapses and explaining the cause. In fact, we don't anticipate the final report until 2026. Now, we won World War II in less time than it's going to take them to do this report. So that is frustrating, quite frankly, but it also is just a reminder that when the legislature took up some of the condo issues, they were doing it without really having a definitive explanation of what happened at Champlain Towers. I know a lot of people have views on it, but this investigation, I mean, I remember them telling me, oh, it's going to take at least a year, and I thought that was long. And now you're sitting here. So the reality is that this was something that was a concern. Obviously, Champlain Towers is not the only condo building in the state of Florida. We've got them up and down the coast, particularly in Southeast Florida, and particularly here in Pinellas County. It's an important part of the state. We've got a lot of units in the state of Florida. And so the legislature, in response to Surfside, they initiated requirements for condo associations to complete regular safety inspections and make preventative repairs to make sure that buildings are safe. The deadline to do those inspections is coming up at the end of the year, and what's ended up happening is this has triggered some large assessments to meet the requirements of the inspections and the repairs at the last minute. Now, these associations should have been keeping cash reserves on hand sufficient to make necessary repairs, but as we've learned, many have failed to do so throughout the course of many, many years, and there have been also a lot of other issues with how some of these associations are run, some good and some not so good. But you are facing now significant cost burdens being passed on to unit owners, and so it isn't like we haven't seen since Surfside happened. That happened to coincide with when you started to see a lot of inflation throughout the economy that's affected everything that people are buying and are needing to do. So you have a lot of people in these condos that are in fixed incomes, a lot of senior citizens. If there was no issue with condos, it would still be something that may be difficult to afford just the normal payments and the normal fees. Then when you have all these costs with groceries and everything in between, and then you may get hit with an assessment, that's going to be where some people just aren't going to be able to afford that. And I don't think the intent of what the legislature did was to have people have to leave their units because they can no longer afford to be in. I think what the legislature is trying to do is let's have transparency, let's make sure that unit owners know what needs to be repaired, and let's make sure that there's a structure in place to be able to tackle needed repairs. So you're now in a situation as this deadline comes up, there's a lot of anxiety about the impending inspections and assessments. And we did last week, we were down in Miami, and we met with some folks who are affected by this. We're here today in Pinellas County to do the same and to solicit feedback, to listen to people's concerns. And then I think the path forward would be by the end of the year, generating the ideas that the legislature can then run with, and produce some reforms that are going to be sensible, that are going to continue to support transparency, that will support safety, but are also going to do that in a way that is not going to be something driving people out of their condo units. There are differences in terms of different buildings that may need repairs. There's some repairs that probably should be done, but are not necessarily related to the survivability of the building or the structure of the building. And then there are others that may be more serious, and clearly people should know that and then have an ability to do it and make the necessary repairs. So we had listened to a number of folks talking about some of the things that could be done. Clearly, some of these deadlines and having the reserves, there's an interest, I think, in maybe smoothing that out so it's not such a hard and fast, right now you got to pony up all this money. And so I know the legislature will look at that and see if there's a way that can be perhaps reconfigured. Then there's also the possibility that we could do some zero interest loans to some of the, whether it's the individual unit owners, whether it's the associations. There's difference of opinion about how you would do that, but particularly in some of the buildings that may have real significant issues, and focus on that. Could you do that so that people are not forced to cough up massive amounts of money? Now again, some of these buildings, they should have had some of these things done, taken care of in the past. They should have had more cash reserves. That's just a fact. But we are where we are, and we want to make sure that we're doing right by the people of Florida. So we want to continue to listen. I think today will be informative, but the goal has to be that we're generating the necessary ideas and the reforms to provide relief, that would be passed by the legislature and signed into law by the end of the calendar year. I don't think you can wait till the next legislative session, because I think a lot of these deadlines will have already come and gone. So I know there's a lot of folks, Nick and others, are eager to make sure that they get it right, and we stand by, of course, as governor, wanting to work with them to be able to get it across the finish line. So I'm glad to have the folks here today joining us. We're going to pass it around, let them say a few things, and we'll have a little bit of a discussion. So we'll start with our senator from Florida's 18th District, Nick DeSantis.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you for putting together this roundtable. It should be no surprise to the audience and folks watching this. This condo issue has become the #1 issue of folks reaching out to my office, whether that's phone calls, emails. Over the summer, I've gone to various condo associations to get that feedback. Those rooms are filled with 100, 150 people. So this issue is real. And we're in a situation here in the state of Florida where the governor and myself both got elected in 2018. We've done incredible work to make the state of Florida the most attractive state in the country. What is very concerning to me, and the feedback that I'm getting, is that some seniors 65 and older, they're having a tough time paying these assessments. They're having a tough time staying in their condos. We've got a condo market that is beginning to decline. They're having a tough time selling these properties if, in fact, they do want to leave. I do not want to see our state in that situation for our seniors. So conversations like this are incredibly important. I had the honor of meeting one of my constituents, Ronnie, and she has a real-world story that I've heard, dozens and dozens and dozens of times. This issue is about time and money. Time meaning we have a looming deadline that many of our seniors are very, very nervous about, and rightfully so. There's a financial issue here where these folks are looking for financial help to stay in their homes. They've chosen the state of Florida to live in the golden years of their lives, and they're having a tough time doing that. And I do think that we have an opportunity and a responsibility to make sure that we come up with some solutions. We want to still focus on the safety and the responsibility of these condo associations to ensure that they're structurally sound, to ensure that they're putting enough money in reserves. But we also want to make sure that is not an overdue burden. We have an opportunity, I think, to prioritize some of these properties where, if you're far from the coast or you don't have a lot of issues, maybe there's a glide path option that we can consider to, again, ease that burden. We want folks to stay here. We want the state to continue to be attractive. Conversations like this with our constituents are incredibly important, and I hear them loud and clear. And I do think this is a huge opportunity to make this right. And hopefully by the end of the year, I'm incredibly supportive for that. So, Governor, again, thank you for leading this conversation, because it's probably the most important conversation we're going to have between now and the end of the year.
Okay, great. All right, Ronnie, you want to take the floor?
Okay, sure. So first of all, thank you for coming here. It gives me hope. So I'm 72 years old. I live in a 55 and over community, not near the water, built concrete block, and built in 1970, and actually in pretty good shape. We've had our milestone inspection. We passed our milestone inspection with few things that we have to fix. And we're getting, my maintenance fee is going to now double with the SIRS study. And then the SIRS study, which is quite massive, it takes into account the fact that it gives the remaining useful life of different items. So it gave the remaining useful life of the roof 5 years, yet we're being told we have to put on a new roof. So that doesn't make sense to me. It's like common sense. So there are items like that where some of these reserve studies are real overkill. Plus they added on 5 components that were never put on there to be reserved for, like electricity, electrical work, plumbing, and in an older building you have old pipes. But we've managed to keep up those things all these years. So throwing it all onto us at one time, I have people sending out letters to our condos to tell them that they're going to buy their units for cash. And we've actually had a couple of people already sell to these people coming in to take their units and fix them up and try to resell them and make some money. And, I'm a board president. It's become a full-time job now. Nobody wants to hire me at 72, so I can make a little extra income to keep up with this. And I've lived here in the condo for 22 years. I bought the place for my mom, and she passed away, and now I live in the condo. And I just want to be able to help these people, because they're calling me on the phone going, I was going to retire. How am I going to retire? And, and we're not one of the bad actors, and there are bad actors, for sure. But it's not everybody, and why should we be penalized when we've tried to do the right thing? So that's pretty much what I have to say.
Great. Well, thank you. Okay, Deborah Reinhardt.
Thank you, Governor, again for holding this roundtable. As a person who represents condominium associations for over 33 years, and I'm talking about thousands of them, Ronnie's story is not unique at what we're facing right now. And the concern that we all have is, how are we going to handle what needs to be done to make sure that these buildings are safe? The milestones inspections are very important, and we're very supportive of that. But on top of that, facing these mandated structural integrity reserves implementation at the same time. Our homeowners are communicating with us on a daily basis and very concerned that they can't live in their unit any longer because the fees to maintain and the requirements that are on them, they just can't afford. So I'm hoping today we can come up with some alternatives, and one of them perhaps being that we can look at these deadlines and figure out a way that maybe we can move them, that they would be a more reasonable glide path to what these community associations are facing.
Great. Okay, Earl Cooper.
Thank you for being here, Governor. It's nice to meet you and honored to be here at the table with you. I come from a construction background, and I purchased my parents' condo in Bel Air. It's called South Garden 6. It was built in 1980. Some of the units are still untouched inside, and I immediately became on the board of directors of the association, and we have been redoing the inside of the building. We've completely redone the inside of the building. We had a plan for do the inside, lined the cast iron pipes that have rusted out in the building, and we are getting to a phase of doing the exterior envelope, going back, and it hadn't been done in 20 years. And we have all this planned, and now we have the SARS to fund that, which we weren't expecting. We have an ELSS, which is the Emergency Life Safety System. Our building only has sprinklers in the hallways and common areas. And what we're going to have to do is, we've actually been working on this since 2019. We had an approved plan for the life safety, and it's changed. We had to reapply because the permit expired, COVID hit, couldn't get anybody to go do the work. What I'm trying to get to the point is that we've planned these renovations to bring our building back up to as new condition, and now we've been hit with another, the ELSS, which is about $700,000. We've got the
Building. Oh, the SERS?
the SERS to fund, we've got $900,000 in reserves in our building, which for what we have been doing on a scheduled basis was fine. And we've had minor assessments, a couple of major ones that were getting people upset about can they pay for this, but it was needed to bring the building up to what it should be. And this last one now, we're out shopping alone for these exterior repairs to bring the building up to shape. And the ELSS report, we're looking at $3.6 million. Our building's 9 stories, has a parking garage in the bottom. We're having to add fire sprinklers in the parking garage. We're having to add a sprinkler head in each unit at the front door, a sprinkler head outside the front door to create a safety compartment in case of a fire, which is good. I'm not saying it's bad. And the assessment that we've been talking about now for the last year, trying to plan this out, the smallest apartment, which is like 1,200, 1,300 square feet, the assessment is in the high $30,000. My unit's 1,400 square feet. My assessment's $49,000. We have, it goes up from there. We have one unit, which is a larger unit. They took 2 units and combined them. Their assessment's $100,000. And our building is made up of people 35 years old with a couple of young kids up to almost 100. I think Dorothy, she just had her 99th birthday. And how do you go tell Dorothy that your assessment is more than you probably ever made in your life? Her assessment's going to be $49,000. You know, where's she going to go?
Great. Well, thanks for views. So, Ronnie, I think you had raised an important issue. The Surfside, obviously, catastrophic event. You have people that are just going to bed at night, just like any other night, and in the middle of the night the building just collapses, and you have massive numbers of casualties, and even the people that escaped from the other building was really a harrowing experience. The legislature did a series of reforms. Clearly, if there's something that could have been done to prevent that, and it's not clear that what is in law now would have prevented that, to be honest. I mean, we're still getting reports in about, but what was done is triggering things that you had pointed out that are not really related to like whether a building can survive, or things that I think if there was any risk of a building not being able to stand, I think people would want to be able to do. But it seems like there's now fees and costs associated with things that are tangential to kind of the core safety of the building. Is that true?
Yes, and we also had to pay for all the studies on top of everything else, so that was an unexpected cost as well. Plus, you know, I had someone come to me just the other day to take out a reverse mortgage. I mean, because he said he's not going to have enough money. We had a board meeting yesterday. I got assessed a $7,000 fee, you know, and it's the folks in my building don't know what's about to happen. You know, I mean, I post things on a bulletin board, but we're not fancy. We don't have a website, which we're going to be required to have now, which is another thing we're going to have to pay for and keep up with. But, you know, which is a good thing because it'll inform people. But, you know, and then I don't understand how it is good for the economy, because what's going to happen? You have like 5 million people come here from Canada, and I have Canadians in my complex, and they're going to sell because of the exchange rate. A $7,000 assessment costs them $10,000 or $12,000. So they're not going to be spending to keep the small businesses going. There's that too.
And what were the, you know, prior to this period, there were obviously would be periodic assessments since you've lived there. What were those look like, or did you have any?
The biggest assessment was for our elevator. We had to put in a new elevator cab because the termites got at it. And that was about $100,000 assessment. But to me, that's like $3,000. This is the largest assessment I've had, and I've lived here for 21 years. So it's big, and every single building in our complex has to put on a new roof. And there's 6 buildings. So it's like over, you know, almost $2 million job right there. Plus all the construction that's about to occur, and you know, and then we have to hire lawyers now. We have to have contracts read. These are expenses we don't usually have. I think I've gone to a lawyer once in the last 4 years, that we hired a lawyer because somebody decided to run an Airbnb out of their condo, which is against the rules. But you know, and then that's going to happen more and more too, because if you're going to have transient people coming in, buying up condos, reselling condos, the whole structure of my community is going to be different, completely different.
So what would you like to see done?
I'd like to see that we could have access as associations, not as individuals, as associations, to finance some of these projects at a no-interest loan that's stretched out. It's not fixing things. It's a matter of stretching out the timeline here. And also, you know, you could have the SIRS study be the main item that you're looking at as far as what you're supposed to reserve for, not having an opinion from this one and that one. I mean, common sense wise, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me, you know. And anyway, so that's one of the things I would think. And then the HB 1029, the condo help bill, there's nothing there. There's no forms, there's no inspection people, there's no anything. So, I mean, they initiated this, they put money there, and my residents are hoping that I can pull off a miracle, but I can't even do anything because there's nobody to call. So,
Senator DeSantis, so you know, you have different things that need to be done from time to time. The legislature's imposed some hard deadlines. You know, what's wrong with just saying, okay, have the transparency, let the unit owners kind of know what potentially need to be done, but then letting them do that on an appropriate timetable for them? I mean, why is it that it has to be this hard and fast deadline? I mean, is there a reason behind that, or was that just arbitrarily selected?
Yeah, that's a great question. Look, I think, when you look at what happened at Surfside, obviously there's a commitment and it's extraordinary circumstances like that. You want to ensure that doesn't happen again. And so I think that, and to your point, we didn't have that study coming out of Surfside in a timely manner so that we can craft that public policy around what we found in Surfside. And I think that what has begun to happen here is very interesting to me is that at first, the feedback that I've been getting are folks in condo associations that were kicking the can down the road. But now that this is kind of transformed into, folks like Ronnie, who has been doing the right things all these years, putting enough money in the reserves, making responsible decisions, making sure that the maintenance and upkeep were on time and doing that in a responsible way. They're now burdened with all of these assessments and all of these things happening at one time. And this, Governor, the 6 years I've been in the legislature, I've lost count of the time that we've gone to special session. We go to special session to fix things just like this because, what we initially attempted to do in the legislature, in many cases we have to see how that works in the real world. And this is certainly what we're hearing today. Is just one small example of hundreds that my office alone, just here in Pinellas County, have been hearing. So I am very open to creating flexibility to give these folks some more time, and certainly open to having that conversation on low interest or zero interest loans. And obviously, devil's in the details, but I think that there needs to be a commitment certainly from the legislature to have these conversations and ultimately translate that into legislation that's going to help folks like Ronnie and people in her association.
Okay, Earl, what do you think should be done?
I think what needs to be done, right now we've got all the apples, the bad apples and the good apples in the same barrel. What we need to do is take the bad apples out. It's not too hard to find out who those are, find out what their financial condition is, send the fire marshal or the building inspector over to their building and do a visual inspection if they haven't had their visual inspection already, or make it mandatory that the visual inspection has to go to the building department to find out which buildings are truly in trouble. But to put a building like ours, which we've planned to do these repairs over the last 5 years, and now all of a sudden everything that we've planned to do, we've got these tremendous other bills that we didn't know we were going to have. It's just not right. There has to be a reorganization of the bad apples first, and then the next level, the ones that are questionable. But the ones that are the good apples, they need a little more time because we've been assessing our owners for 4 years for improvements, and we've tried to get it to a balance that they can afford, but to have all of a sudden we got another 200, 300,000, more than that. It's like $1 million that we've got to come up with that we hadn't planned on.
Do you have a sense how frequent we have kind of more the bad apple condo buildings and associations versus the ones that are doing the right thing? I mean, is it half of them are bad, 10%? I mean, I know it wouldn't be scientific, but just what's your gut tell you?
I think the buildings that have a more affluent group of owners are doing more of the right things. They're probably not up to, Deborah, you can correct me on this, of the fully funding, but it's just the timeline to do this. When we've got, for 5 years, we've been planning other things to do.
What are your recommendations?
Well, first, if I can just comment on the bad apples, I have to tell you, in my company, and we don't have bad apples. Our community associations over the years have done the right thing and done what they could. Again, the option to waive reserves or partially fund reserves was given to them, and they took advantage of it in some cases. Many did not. But what's important now is we're all in this kind of together, and we have to figure out a way that we can manage making sure that these buildings are safe, but making it affordable. So I'm encouraged to hear that we're looking at some interest-free, low-interest loans that would help some of these community associations. I'm also very, happy to hear that we're going to perhaps have a special session and look at delaying this implementation of this structural integrity reserve study. Beside the cost that we're talking about, which is a very real issue, we also have different interpretations from the attorneys in our industry on what exactly we are supposed to be doing. And so I think the whole implementation schedule process for this goal to get our community associations to where they need to be with their reserve funding needs to be evaluated. There's some other things for consideration. There are buildings that have been, from their milestone inspection, condemned. And goodness, we don't want anybody dying, being hurt, or anything. But those homeowners were displaced. They had to continue paying their maintenance fees and pay for a place to live. So maybe, outside the box, we can think about if a person was eligible for some assistance, that maybe some housing during this time of getting their building where it needs to be could be something that the legislation and the governor, you can kind of consider moving forward. There are also some, and they're not significant, but it would help our community associations. There's some things like capital contributions. That's someone who's coming into their community, who's buying in an HOA, not a condo, but in an HOA, if it's provided for and the statute doesn't prevent it, they pay a capital contribution into that community. It's prohibited in condos. Silly. Why? That's an alternative way to kind of get some more income from these. There are ceilings on sales applications, for example, or rental applications. They can only charge a certain amount. Those things I think really do need to be looked at, that maybe we've kind of boxed in our boards with how they are able to afford their budgets on an annual basis. There's also, we're facing this now, which we're seeing a lot, as interest rates have gone up over the past several years. Many of our associations, who are the good actors, who put a lot of money away into their reserves and are earning significant interest, they can't use that interest to pay the tax liability that comes along with that. That has to be a separate line item in the operating account. And I think that's something
That's because of state or federal law?
That's because the state says that you have to leave the reserve interest in the reserves. You can't use it for anything else. Mm-hmm. So if there was a provision that said you could use it only for paying the proportionate share of taxes, that would be a help. So I think there's some things that we can look at. I'm excited to hear that you guys are going to look at this, perhaps call a special session or some workshops, and it's absolutely needed. So thank you.
Do you want to say anything about pool reserves?
Oh, that's for a major conversation.
I think that I believe you have the ability to call a special session.
Yeah, look, I mean,
Right?
we're generating ideas. Nick has been great. Other members of the legislature have been great. But I've made it clear we're not going to punt this till next year. That's not going to happen. Okay. Don't worry. How you call it, when you call it, things need to be kind of teed up so that we're going to be successful. I mean, I can call one for next week, right? And then everyone's running around with chickens with their heads cut off, and that's not going to end up doing. And as we've seen, I mean, just think about some of the things Ronnie was talking about. This is well-intentioned legislation. I mean, I think it passed unanimously, probably. Unanimously in the legislature, very well-intentioned. And yet, it's created a little bit of a cottage industry. Lawyers, all this other stuff, that's just what happens. And so there are consequences to this. And I said at the beginning, I said, look, I'm open to what they're going to do. But this is going to be a work in progress, because it was inevitable that there'd be issues that would happen. It's a very complicated area, and this has been an area that you've had issues in for a long time, apart from the surf side. So that's just right. So yes, it's got to be done by the end of the year. I think as people that follow kind of how Florida government works, and you have the election, then they come in and get sworn in November, and then they have committee weeks, throughout the balance of the year, on and off. So they'll be in Tallahassee anyways. And so my hope is continue to get the feedback. Let's tee up some good issues. These guys will be ready to run with a package, and that you can do it. So it's not a question of whether something will be done before the end of the year. I mean, I don't think that we can just do nothing, and I've made that clear, but we got to do it right. And, I could just sit around and say, hey, let's just do this, or I could just let's say, hey, just figure something out. But I think it's better to solicit the feedback. I know the legislators have been getting a lot of feedback from their constituents, and that's what they're elected to do, to take that feedback and then to figure out what policies make sense to be able to deliver the types of reforms that are gonna help people. So yes, so we will knock it out. We have time to do it, and I think it's just a question of making sure we get it right and make sure that we're doing what we need to do to help folks. I mean, my general view is, if there's something about the structural integrity of the building, clearly the residents were going to want to know that, and so having some type of study done in light of Surfside, especially on older buildings. If you look at the condos in the state of Florida, the majority of the units are more than 30 years old, and actually maybe even more than 50, but definitely more than 30. I've seen the breakdowns before. So that's just the reality. And again, we've got some of the best buildings in our country were built 150 years ago. I mean, it doesn't mean that the building's going to fall because it's decades old, but I think what it does mean is just look to see what issues are there. Beyond that, though, run-of-the-mill things, my view would be that should be something that's transparent. Unit owners should know what's going on. There should be candor from the board and all that. But they should be able to make decisions about how they want to address that. I mean, so if someone's roof is leaking, you probably want to fix it, but should the state say there should be a deadline to when you fix a leaky roof, or should we just trust folks to be able to navigate it? I think you just trust folks to be able to navigate it. Yeah. And so we've got to strike the balance between providing some safety measures that ultimately will help condo owners identify issues that they may not have been able to identify under past practice, but at the same time, leaving the governance in these decisions to the individual associations and the unit owners as much as humanly possible. We were kind of on one side. This kind of brought us on another, and probably need a little moderation into how this works. So I think you're going to be able to see an opportunity to be able to get some stuff done. And like I said, I'm open to doing for the buildings that are kind of the most at risk of or needing something quickly, that we could have some zero interest loans. You're fortunate you live in a state that has the lowest per capita debt of any state in the United States out of all 50 states. You're talking about a state that from the 1840s till I became governor, you look at all the debt the state of Florida had, we've paid down 36% of all the taxpayer-supported debt, and we're likely to knock off a lot more because legislature gave us more money for accelerated debt repayment. We've got a big surplus. We've got a lot of things going for us that it gives us flexibility to be able to address issues as they've come up. And we've done that in a variety of ways, whether it's what we've done for infrastructure, transportation, massive infusion to accelerate projects. We've got stuff in Tampa Bay that's going to be accelerated. We've got things all across the state. And we're happy to do that, and we'll continue to do it. But we are in a position where we're able to do a program like that really without breaking a sweat if it's the right thing to do. And we just announced, I just did a press conference we were in Orlando at Lawton Giles Elementary about the Florida Prepaid College Savings Program. So this is a program that over the last 4 years, because we don't raise tuition at our state universities, the tuition's the same today as the day I took office. We've reduced prices for families that want to do prepaid by $2.6 billion in 4 years, and did $850 million in rebates of families that have paid into it. They're getting $850 million back. What other state would give you money back in that situation? Not a lot. They would take it, and they would use it to do other things. And actually, we have $130 million that hasn't been claimed yet. So if you're a prepaid family, I'll tell you again, you may have money coming to you, thousands of dollars, right? So all that just being said, that we just got to get it right. We have the ability to do what we need to do. If we need to do some loans, zero interest. Now, interest rates are still higher than they were, but we did have 50 basis points cut. It should have happened, I think, in July. They didn't do any cut then, and I think the Fed has really mismanaged this. I think it's hurt a lot of people, particularly with housing. But nevertheless, they're doing that, and they'll likely do another rate cut, maybe 25, maybe 50 before the end of the year. So you will start to see that. I don't know that means you're going to see inflation just peter out. It's possible you could end up seeing it accelerate again, especially if they keep spending all this money in Washington. It's also possible the softness of the economy, that starts to become more of a problem nationwide, because I do think there's evidence of softening. So all that being said, we're going to be responsive no matter what in Florida. We've got the reserves. Our rainy day fund, since I became governor, we've tripled the rainy day fund. In fact, I think we have like a couple $100 million that we are allowed to put in, and then the law says you can't have any more money in the rainy day fund because it represents such a big proportion of our overall budget. It can only be a certain percentage of your overall spend, and I think it was like $1.3 billion when I became governor, and now I think it's over $4 billion. So I think we have a couple $100,000. Once we hit $4.5 billion or something like that, you got to stop. You can't even do it. So that's a good position for us to be in, and we're going to make sure that we will act accordingly. Is there any other ideas that anybody has about?
I don't know if this is possible, but maybe to be able to more easily remove bad actor board members.
So we've done, there have been some series of reforms. I think we did another bill this year. There's about transparency, about having some accountability, but clearly condo governance, especially in some parts of the state, has been an issue. Let's just put it that way. So what can we do for series of reforms to kind of make it so that there's accountability? There's also risk if you do too much in that, because we want people to be able to make their own decisions. But yes, I think that there's interest if there's more to do to reform some of the governance.
And that the legislators, when they sit down and talk about these things, actually talk to board members and associations from different areas.
No, I think that's happening. I know Nick has been all over this. Mm-hmm. Our South Florida reps, when we were down in Miami Lakes, they've been really working with their constituents. And part of it is just because it's like, when things are going well, then they don't hear. But then when there's something like this assessments, and all of a sudden people have a lot of anxiety, then they reach out. So they've gotten a lot of feedback, and I think it's this whole thing is being driven by the feedback, and that's why we wanted to do these roundtables around the state to be able to continue to get more information. Anything else for the good of the order?
No, I'm just very thankful that we were able to come here today and have this robust conversation, and look forward to hopefully participating maybe in some other discussions.
I just think the timeline needs to change.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's the big thing.
Yeah, you look at if someone bought a condo in Florida 15 years ago, it's more valuable today. There's no question. The market collapsed in 2007, 2008. If you bought it, you probably got a pretty good deal, and it has gone up. And so somebody's in a position now where they're getting hit with these assessments that may not be something they can afford or pay. Some people say, well, you can just sell it, you've made money off of it or whatever. The problem with that is, one, not everyone wants to do that. Some people are happy with where they're at and they want to stay. But two, just because you're making money off a property and sell it, then where do you go? Because homes have gone up. The real estate values have gone up, particularly over the last 15 years, but certainly over the last 3 or 4. That's just the reality. Part of it's driven by demand for people wanting to move and live in Florida. Part of it is some of these policies that the Fed had done, federal government spending and borrowing policies. it has increased housing. So it's not so simple to say you can just sell it. In fact, you wouldn't want to put somebody in that situation. So we are mindful of that. We want people to be able to stay in their units. If that's something that they're happy with, we want to make sure that's able to be done. And so there'll be other ideas that I think will come to the forefront. But I do think it's constructive to be able to hear, listen to the feedback, and arm the representatives in the legislature with the ideas. But yes, just so everyone's clear, we have to act this year. We can't punt this. The legislature doesn't even come into session until March of next year. That obviously is not going to be appropriate, and it needs to be done before the end of the calendar year. So I would very much mark your calendar that at some point over the next 3.5 months, something will be done. And I think it's going to be something that'll be good. I think it's something that'll alleviate a lot of these concerns. And so I look forward to working with the legislature on this. They made a good faith effort following Surfside when they didn't have all the information that we needed to provide some reforms so that something like that never happened again. And we don't want to see anything like that happen again. If there's things we can do, I mean, I don't think if the Surfside people were said 2 weeks before that happened that you needed to do this, or 2 years before, otherwise this, I think everyone would have been willing to labor under really significant assessments, even if it meant preserving the integrity of the structure and avoiding something like that happening. That was a really, really traumatic experience for the state. It was one of the worst days in the state's history. And so we want to do what we can to prevent. At the same time, it's like, man, there's so many other aspects of this that are being impacted that have nothing to do with that. And we want to make sure that we're doing this in the most targeted, efficient, and effective way possible. So I think that's the goal. Make sure that we have transparency, make sure that we have a strong commitment to safety for our residents, but also making sure that residents are able to enjoy life, stay in their units, and not have some of these really crushing financial burdens placed on them. Especially, look, this is not easy for anyone, but especially our elderly who are on fixed income. I mean, that's the real difficult thing to do at that point. So thanks to everyone who's participated in this. We're going to continue to solicit and get feedback, and we will be working with the legislature. They will be in Tallahassee anyways, November, December time period. And so this will be something that I'm making clear now. It's not going to be able to be pushed off. And I think most of the legislators that I've talked to, and Nick can correct me, I mean, I think most of them want to do something by the end of the year. So yes, so we'll act. Okay, anyone have any questions?
Governor, why don't you call a special session now? People are planning for an end of year deadline. Don't they need to know now when you said?
Well, if you were listening to what I said instead of looking on your phone, you would have said that you can call a special session without having the reforms lined up. If they're half-baked, people just run around like chickens with their heads cut off. And you could end up generating a product that causes problems. So we're doing this very thoughtfully. I've made it very clear to the public that we are going to do something. I'll have them in, and I don't even think I'm going to need to. I think they're going to want to call a session when they're in anyways. So it's going to happen. But we got to do this thoughtfully, and we got to make sure that this is given the relief people need, that we're having, that we are perhaps recognizing distinctions between condo associations and condos that have performed well and have done the things that need to be done, and maybe some of the others that are more in the minority, but that maybe haven't done that. So those things need to be hashed out. So we're proud to be able to go around the state and solicit feedback from people. I think we've got a number of good ideas, and those ideas will be worked through. But when the legislature does address this year, just know that it's not going to be willy-nilly. There's going to have been thought that was put into it. They're going to have looked at all these different issues, and they will have arrived at a consensus product that will address the needs that people have here in the state of Florida. So we got to do it, but we got to do it right.
I mean, that's off topic, Governor. So the first vote by mail ballots are coming in now from overseas military voters, and soon everybody will be voting The voters of Hillsborough and Orange and Osceola counties will be voting on state attorney races. I know you want to keep those incumbents in there, but what happens if the voters do vote for Andrew Warren and/or Monique Worrell? Can you tell the voters we overturn the popular vote on November 5th?
So here's just the fact. When both of those folks were in office, they took the position that they didn't have to enforce laws they disagreed with. That caused people to be put back on the street, who then victimized folks that should not have been victimized. There were cops that were shot because Monique Worrell put people back on the street. You talk to law enforcement in all three of those counties. You talk to the sheriff in Hillsborough, Sheriff Cronister. He'll tell you you need a prosecutor that's going to enforce the law and lock up the bad guys. Don't put them back on the street. He'll tell you what it was like under the old regime when the criminals knew they can get away with crimes. Talk to the folks in Orange and Osceola who work in law enforcement. Talk to the victims who were victimized by people that had just been pushed in and out of the system, blaming the society, not wanting to hold criminals accountable. I can tell you, you need prosecutors that are going to be guided by the law and that are going to enforce the law without fear or favor, that are not going to be bringing in a political agenda. And certainly, you cannot have prosecutors that are going to coddle the criminals and care more about the feelings and the rights of criminals than they do about the well-being of the victims of the crimes. And that is something that has been true all across this country. When you have these prosecutors who are not willing to enforce the law or who turn dangerous people back out on the street, you see the results. And they've been catastrophic in places ranging from San Francisco to Los Angeles to Philadelphia to Baltimore. And this used to not even be controversial. Nobody thought a prosecutor should go in and try to put people out. They thought the job of the prosecutor was to hold people accountable. It didn't matter whether you were a Republican or a Democrat. There was no difference in that view of how prosecutors should function in law enforcement. This is a relatively new phenomenon over the last 10 or 15 years that all of a sudden prosecutors think, you know, they don't like this law, they don't like that law, they don't like that. So instead of running for the legislature and trying to change laws you disagree with, which is the way we're supposed to do it, they just take it upon themselves not to enforce the law at all. That's not the way our system was designed. And so to me, it's just about, we want to make sure that our state is safe. We want to make sure law and order prevails, but particularly in some of the more urban areas, you've got to hold criminals accountable. You cannot have a revolving door where they just keep going out and out. And you can talk to folks who work, talk to Sheriff Cronister, talk to folks who are on the beat in Osceola or Orange counties, people who work for the deputy sheriffs or police officers. They want a prosecutor who's going to be willing to stand up for them against the criminals. Members of the public want a prosecutor to stand up for them against the criminals. And that should just be, this shouldn't even be a debate in this country at this point, given the carnage that's happened in some of these other jurisdictions around the country. And I would note, you hear some of this stuff like crime in Florida is at a 50-year low. They'll now say some of these other places are, and that because some of the jurisdictions aren't reporting the figures. Well, yeah, that's a lot. That's easy. I mean, that's just like me saying, yeah, Florida State beat Boston College. If you don't report Boston College's points, how do you do that? Nobody does that. So public safety is paramount. We can have a great economy. We can have great education. And, we're number one in education 2 years in a row nationwide. You can have all that, but if you don't have public safety, it all starts to go down the drain. Yes, sir.
My question is, this is something you're passionate about. You're talking about public safety. We're seeing a big increase in local school districts with all these school grants. And we're seeing in Hillsborough County, we're seeing it statewide across the country. At what point do you think the state is going to have to step in, if they're going to step in, and kind of help these districts out?
Well, what I've seen is a lot of law enforcement around the state take this very seriously. It is not a joke to threaten violence at a school. Some people think that that's funny. Some people think that they can get attention from that. Some people get a kick at creating anxiety in the community. I can tell you in Florida, if you're doing that, you're going to be held accountable. We're going to prosecute you. You look at Volusia County Sheriff, you look at Grady Judd, you look at people around the state. I think they're taking it very, very seriously. And yes, look, we stand by to help. We've done more on school security than any state in the United States since I've been governor, and part of that was because I became governor on the heels of the Parkland massacre down in South Florida. And so if you look at whether it's school resource officers, whether it's the funding that has gone for school hardening, whether it's things like the Guardian program, which acts as a deterrent, we've taken this issue very, very seriously. But fake threats, it's not a joke, and we'll hold you accountable if you're doing that. So I've actually been pleased to see a very robust response on the local level. If there's things that the state can do to be helpful, we will. But this has not been something that our state and locals or our local officials and law enforcement have been ignoring. I think they've been very proactive on it, and I think you need to do that to be able to help people. And you got to take this stuff seriously. How many times do we see somebody committing, really horrific act of violence, and then there's nothing in their background at all that people would suspect? That's actually rare. It's usually you can point to things in their background where they have acted out or made threats or talked about. I mean, this guy in Georgia, 14 years old, he was talking about doing this, and they kind of just didn't. I think the FBI was apprised of it. FBI didn't take action. In Florida, one of the things we said was we're going to take those threats seriously. We actually have behavioral threat assessment that Florida Department of Law Enforcement started back in 2019, and the goal of it is to take these threats seriously. If it creates part of a profile that has been replicated in other places where people have acted out, then you take it seriously and you have an intervention. And if people with Parkland, that shooter should have been prosecuted multiple times for different conduct. He had all these red flags, and they basically just passed the buck. So our view is, don't pass the buck, be serious about it, hold people accountable. And I do think, from what I've seen, I think whether it's Sheriff Chitwood in Volusia, whether you have people like Grady Judd, I know Sheriff Chronister, we've got a lot of folks who are very, very steadfast in policing this stuff. And again, if it's a real threat, that's of course serious. But if it's a fake, if it's a hoax, if you think you're doing that because you're going to get kicks or you think it's funny, no, you're going to face the music on that. So just be prepared for that, and that's what will happen. So it's great to be back in Pinellas County. Keep the feedback coming. Talk to your representatives. Talk to your state senators. We have a lot of good ideas, I think. I think we've got a sense of what the major problems are, but I know they want to hear from you. So drop them an email, call their office, go visit them, talk to them. There is going to be action taken this year. It's going to be done thoughtfully. It's going to be done properly, but there will be action taken this year. So on the one hand, be very forward about that. Speak your mind, let them know what's on your mind, let them know what you think should happen. But on the other hand, there is a lot of anxiety out there. Just know, if you're in that situation, that this is not an issue that's going to be swept under the rug. It's not an issue that's going to be ignored. This will be an issue that will be addressed. And I think it'll be addressed in a way, particularly for some of these really significant cost burdens and some of our vulnerable residents, that we'll have an eye to providing meaningful relief. So thanks, everybody, and we've got more feedback to get, more work to do, but we will do something this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Governor.
Appreciate it, John. Good to meet you guys. Pleasure. Great job. Wow.